So we're studying the Sugi on Daf Ayin Dalid of Rabbi Yonasan ben Shol about the case of Yochel Atzilo Bi'echad Me'varav. And you may recall that we were studying the Rambam, Perek Aleph Milchus Rotzeach Halacha Yud Gimel. And we were trying to figure out, in this case where he could have saved the victim, the nirdaf, without killing the rodef, does that mean that he's not a rodef? Because a rodef means that if you leave things as is, the rodef is going to definitely kill the nirdaf. But here, and there's no other way of preventing the murder of the nirdaf without killing the rodef. But in this case, we could prevent and save the life of the nirdaf without killing the rodef. Therefore, he's not a rodef. But if he's not a rodef, then the question would be, if somebody went ahead and killed the rodef, which he didn't have to do, would he be put to death? And that's where we had that very complex statement in the Rambam, where the Rambam seems to indicate that the person who killed the rodef is a rotzeach, he himself, but ein bezdin, right? So the language of the Rambam is kol heich hayochel lahatzil be'ever me'varav lo tarach b'kach elahitzil b'nafsho shel rodef ahargo hareze shofet domim v'chayev misa. I mean, you can't get more explicit than that. Which, if you take a deep breath at this point without reading the next 5 words in the Rambam, you get the impression that he's not a rodef in this case. And therefore, by killing him, you are a shofet dom yichayev misa. But then he writes, aval ein bezdim misan also. So that became the question here in the context of this Rambam as to whether or not the Rambam holds that Hok Hashem rodef, that he's not a rodef, and therefore if you killed him, you're shofet dom yichayev misa, or no, he still is a rodef. There's some sort of quasi status of a rodef. You follow my point? He's not a rodef, but he is a rodef. He's not a rodef, and therefore if you kill him, you are a shofet domim, yichayev misa. But on the other hand, he is a rodef because we're not going to kill you for killing him. So it was that, that middle of the road stage. Okay. What else? Oh, now we had a different discussion, which we touched upon. I'm just reviewing it because it's been a couple of days, and you could have spoken to the rodef and sort of calmed him down, maybe convinced him that this is not a worthwhile endeavor, to murder somebody. And the question is, does that also come under Rabbi Yonasan's halacha of Yochel Atzilo B'echad Me'varav? Here it's a case of Yochel Atzilo Yedei Dibur Imo, by speaking to him. And therefore, again, we'd have the question, what happens if instead of speaking to him, you went ahead and you murdered and you killed him? And would you be a shofech domim chayev misa in such a case? Or should we say no? Maybe Rabbi Yonasan's principle only applies in the case of Yochel Atzilo B'echad Me'varav. And maybe we could go in this direction, that if we assume that according to the Rambam, ein bezdin mimisano, so if he went and he killed him, right? Let's call him the third party. We'll get back to the victim himself, but the third party went ahead and killed the so-called rodef, and he's chayev misa because, I'm sorry, but what I meant to say is ein bezdin mimisano, so because he is still called a rodef. Could be that in a case where he could stop him, again, that third party could stop the rodef by speaking to him, then for sure he's not a rodef. And in this case, maybe the Rambam would agree that if you killed the rodef who's not a rodef, you'd be chayev misa for that. Then we had another question here about the possible difference between the nirdaf himself in Rabbi Yonason's frame of reference and a third party and a spectator. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Then we got to discuss another question, and that is, what happens? We'll say that Reuven is running after Shimon. We have Levi and we have Yisachar. And Levi is in a position where he could save Shimon by shooting for Reuven's legs, but Yisachar doesn't have that possibility. So Adam Echad, one person could save the Nirdaf by shooting for the legs. But there's another person, another spectator, we call him Yisachar, who doesn't have that option. And the only way that's Yisachar, could save the Nirdaf Shimon is by killing Reuven. Would Yisachar be allowed to kill Reuven in such a case? And again, if we're going to go with the assumption that the reason why in Yochel Lahatzil Mechivarav, the Rambam holds that if you kill the Rodef, you are a Shofek Dom Chayav Mises because Paka Minei Shem Rodef, then we might say that the Yisachar, that other spectator, that additional spectator, would not be allowed to kill the Rodef because he's not a Rodef. But if we're going to say that according to the Rambam, the reason why Ein Bezim Misan also, as we discussed earlier, is because he's still considered a Rodef, then it could be that as far as one person is concerned, he's not allowed to kill him, but he still is a Rodef, and therefore another person, we call him Yisachar, would be allowed to kill him. Now, I don't remember if we spoke about the Ravid in Perek Tes Milchus Malachim Malachet Dalet. I don't remember. I'll just give you a summary of the Ravid, and you'll possibly remind me if we touched on this Ravid. I don't remember that we did. The Ravid says that if you kill a Rodef that was Yochel Atzilo Me'echad Me'varv Yechayev Misin Bezdin, not like the Rambam. No, it's according to the Ravid, complete Hafkah Shem Rodef. Now, getting back to this case where there was Levi and Yisachar on the sidelines, and Levi could prevent the death of Shimon without taking the life of the Rodef, which according to the Ravid means Paka Minei Shem Rodef. But as far as Yisachar is concerned, he doesn't have the ability to save Shimon, the Nirdaf, without killing Reuven, the Rodef. Now, according to the Ravid, we said that if Levi were to kill the Rodef, Reuven, he'd be Chayav Misa, which means that Paka Minei Shem Rodef, then perhaps even Yisachar, if he were to kill Reuven, he would also be Chayav Misa. Now, if we're saying that the Sheni, the second spectator, we call him Yisachar, is also guilty if he kills the Rodef, then you have to assume one little detail, and that is that he's aware of the fact that Levi could save Shimon without killing Reuven. Because I would certainly assume that if he's unaware of that fact, and as far as he's concerned, he couldn't save Shimon without killing Reuven, then not only would he be, I think, exonerated if he went ahead and he killed Reuven, I think he would be even obligated to kill Reuven. I don't know. What do you say? Would he be able to work with the assumption that just like he, at that heat of the hour, that urgency of the moment, would only be able to save the victim by killing the Rodef, then he might assume that, I mean, if he doesn't even know anyone else exists, but let's say he knows someone else exists, does he have a right to assume that just like he has no option to save the Nirdaf, so too that other person, we'll call him Levi, doesn't have any option? Okay. Now, that's more or less what we've discussed in the week to past. And now we move on to the question of the Kalim that we may have touched on it, but I don't think we really got into it. So again, we're on Daf Ayin Daled Amud Aleph. And let's see where we could pick it up. I'm looking for the Omar Rova. Oh, the Omar Rova. So let's see. It's in the wide lines here. I think it's the third of the wide lines. Yeah? Rodef, Shoya Rodef Achar Chavero, Veshiber Asakelim. So the Rodef damages someone else's property. Whose property? Bein shel Nirdaf, Bein shel Kolodom. It matters not, says Rava, whose Kalim he destroys. Potter, he doesn't have to pay. He's exempt from payment because of the principle of Kim Lev the Rabmin. Because at the moment that he broke the Kalim, he was eroded. My timer. What is the underlying principle of Rava's statement? Miskaya benafshu. That at the time of his Redifa, he was Chayiv Misa, and you cannot be Mechayiv someone Mammon if at the same time that he engendered a Chayiv Mammon, he also was Chayiv Misa. Okay, now Rava continues. Now, I just want to make a point here, which in a certain sense, I'm guilty of skipping this over because it really needs a lot more work. And that is that we have a case called Misa Lazeh v'Tashlumin Lazeh. Now, I don't know if that sounds familiar to you at all, but what it means is that the Rodef's Chiyuv Misa is to the Nirdaf, and he breaks the Kalim of a third party. So that's called Misa Lazeh v'Tashlumin Lazeh. And it seems that Rava, when he applies the principle of Kim Lebi the Ramamine, he goes all out. You know, it's an all-encompassing principle. And once there's a Chiyuv Misa vis-a-vis the Nirdaf, even though the Chiyuv Mammon is vis-a-vis, we'll call him the Bala Kalim, some other person, nevertheless, even in Misa Lazeh v'Tashlumin Lazeh, we're going to apply the principle of Kim Levi the Ramin. And again, as I said before, this is part of a broader, more extensive discussion, but it sort of creeps into this sugya that we're learning here in the context of Rabbi Yonasan ben Shol. Because Rabbi Yonasan ben Shol's opinion is that if there's a chiyuv d'mei v'lados, right, there's the nogev, who's also the rodev, right, the nogev, and he knocks out the vlados, kills the vlados of this pregnant woman. And Rabbi Yonasan is going to apply the principle of Kim Levi the Rabbi. Why? Because the Rodef is Chayiv Misa. So it should be, if she dies and he killed the Vlados, then he should be potter from the Vlados, the Bnei Vlados, because at that moment when he killed the Vlados, he killed her as well, and it was Kim Lev the Rabbi. But let's talk about a case of Lo Yeh Asan. If she survives the blow and her Vlados tragically perish, then he has to pay Dmei Vlados. And the Gemara assumes that that's called Misa Lezeh v'Tashlumin Lezeh. But this has to do with Yochel Atzilo B'Echad Meivarav. How is that so? Oh. So it says V'lo Yeh Asan, if she survived it, is Yeonish, which means that he has to pay the Mei Vlados. Now, why does he have to pay the Mei Vlados if he was a Rodef? Oh, so here's where Rabbi Yonasan ben Shaul, to explain the parsha of Lo Yeh Asan Onish Yeonish, he introduces Yochel Atzilo B'Echad Meivarav. Let's assume, like one interpretation of the Rambam, that Poka Vinei Shem Rodef. And therefore he incurs a chiyuv to compensate the Baal for Dmei Vlados. Okay, so what we have here is a situation in which Yochel Atzil B'Echad Meivarav, and therefore he's Chayiv Dmei Vlados. There's no Ptur of Kimlev the Rabbi here because he's not a Rodef. He's Yochel Atzil B'Echad Meivarav. So the Gemara asks the following question: how does Rabbi Yonasan prove from Onosh Yeonish that Yochel Atzil B'Echad Meivarav is not a Rodef? Let's say he's Neragol, literally. And therefore, since he's not a Rodef, therefore he's chayiv to pay for the Dmei Vlados. Maybe we could say that Enoch Hinabi, even though it's Yochel Atzil B'Echad Meivarav, he still has a Shem Rodef. And the reason he pays Dmei Vlados is because it's Misa Lezeh v'Tashlumin Lezeh. So the Chiyuv Misa is towards the person that he was trying to kill. The Chiyuv Mammon is towards the husband of the wife that he actually hit. You have the Masifta, I always forget. Yeah, both of you. So if you take a look here on the left column, towards the top, there's a paragraph that starts Dilma Shiny Hocha, like it's 4 lines down from the top. So he says the following: Shemi yesh lomer shekan zeh shona mishum demisa lezeh v'tashlum lezeh. Shechiyuve amisu v'amomon einen klapi also odom. Kevan shechiva misu klapi achaver shachrav rodaf. So it means Reuven is running after Shimon. But Chiv Mamon is towards the Baal Ha'isha. Shehu Makabel is Dmei Avlodos. Mikri Kazelo Nemer P'tur Kim Lev L'Ramine. Therefore the Parsik is justified for saying Onosh Yonesh. So again, it could be that there's a Chiv Misa vis-a-vis the Rodev. Why is the Rodev Chayv to pay Dmei Vlodos? Because we don't apply Kim Lev Ramine when it's Misa L'Zeh V'Tashlum L'Zeh. And the Gemara is going to quote Rava now to prove that even that Kim Lev Ramine applies even in Misa L'Zeh V'Tashlum L'Zeh. And that's why the Rodev, even if he breaks someone else's Kalim, is pot. So he's Chayav Misa to the Nirdaf, and he's Chayav Mamon to the Balakalim, and Rava says he doesn't have to pay. No one could force him to pay the Balakalim whose Kalim he broke, because at the time that he broke it, he was a Rodef, he was Chayav Misa, even though he's Chayav Misa to one person and Mamon to the other. And that will justify Rabbi Yonasan ben Shol's derivation of Yochel Atzilo B'Yechad Beivar Neragolov from the Pasuk Onosh Yonesh. Just tell me if you're following. There's a lot here, All right. Now we're to continue with the words of Rava. What's the status of the nirdaf vis-a-vis a chiyuv nizkei mamon, either shall rodef or shall kol adam? So Rava says the following: shall rodef pot. If the nirdaf breaks the kalim of the rodef, he doesn't have to pay for that. Shall kol adam, however, chayav. And now the Gemara explains Rava. Shall rodef potish lo ye mamon mamono chaviv olav migufo. That's a very, poetic statement. He says here, "Hutar lenirdaf lifka begufo shall rodef." The nirdaf is allowed to kill the rodef, then how much more so is he allowed to be mazik his mom? Okay, but here he adds two very important words: litzorech hatzola. It doesn't mean that he has a carte blanche license to, burn down the rodef's house. He's allowed to break kalim, which he needs as a fugitive in order to spare and save his life. And he says that this is an addition of Tosfos. Okay, so we now understand that if the nirdaf is allowed to kill the rodef, how much more so, for the sake of his own atzolo, would be allowed to break kalim. This leads me to the conclusion that compensation for damages is a punishment. But here he doesn't deserve a punishment because he was permitted to, for the sake of saving himself. That's not going to work out because it says shall kol adam chayim. Shematzel atzma mamona shel chaveru. If you save your life by destroying someone else's property, then you have to pay compensation for damages. I wonder what in secular law, where there's something parallel. But this last statement here is a kasha for me. It's very difficult for me because I always understood that if you're allowed to destroy someone's kalim, you don't have to pay for destroying it. No, there are two different dimensions here, two different dinim. There's one din as to whether it's heter or isur on a moral level, whether or not you are given license and permitted to break someone else's kelim. And pikuach nefesh is enough to allow you to do so. But don't think you're going to get away with paying for them. You still are a mazik. But in the note here, he quotes a Gemara Bava Kama that just simply sheds a whole different light here on this Gemara, which will allow me to still maintain my position that compensation for damages applies in the restricted case where he's morally, or shall I say, halachically enjoined from destroying someone else's property. Because the Gemara says in Bava Kama, Osur lahatzil atzmo b'mamon chaveru. Now, I haven't read the balance of this footnote, but I'm going to take a leap of faith over here and throw out the following proposition. In Pikuach Nefesh, when you violate a Torah law in order to save your life, or somebody else to save a life, what is that? Is that hutra or dechuya? And I'm going to insist that it's dechuya, which means that he's violating the isur of destroying someone's property, even though he's allowed to do so. Do you hear that paradox? That's called dechuya. Dechuya is a paradox. It means that you violate the isur, but you're permitted to do so. Let's say a nazir is not allowed to be metame himself to a mess. But in the case of a mess mitzvah, he's allowed to do so. That might be dechuya. Meaning he is desecrating his kedushas nazirus, but he's allowed to do so. So there is, so to speak, a maisa avera here. There's no chiyuv, but there's a maisa avera. And then Afkamina is going to be a nezikin, that if by saving yourself, you destroy someone else's property, even though it was necessary to do so, but you still are in violation of that isur being mazik mamono shel chavero, albeit midin dechuya. Let's see what he says. For sure, he's not going to die because of the isur to destroy someone else's property. Right? Al das l'shalim. The language doesn't sit well with me, at least. I mean, for some reason, he has to know that he's going to have to pay for this. I don't understand why, but what's that called? There's like a Latin phrase that a person has to be appraised of his rights before he's guilty of some crime or something. Do you know what I'm talking about? We call it asra, but I think there's a fancy Latin phrase for it. All right. Anyway, never mind. It doesn't interest you. It just, fine. So what happens here Also, liodem lahatzilos atzmo b'momen shel chaver, and yet this pikuach nefesh, and certainly is allowed to do so, obligated to do so. But the Rosh says he has to realize he's going to have to pay. Yeah, but tell me why he has to pay, and the answer is because of dechuya, meaning it's a case where he's allowed to violate the Torah law and destroy someone else's property. Okay, Rava goes on. V'rodev. 1 second. Oh, wait a second. Before we go on, there's a very important Rambam. I don't know if you want to get it up. If I knew how to do this, the technology, I could put it up on the screen. But the Rambam is in the 8th chapter, Perek Ches Milchus Chovel Umazik Halacha Dalet. Nosa Momen Chaveru Biyodo. This was that complicated Rambam. You know what? I'm not so much in the mood for this. Do you remember with the Anos, who's confiscating his property on behalf of the government? Do you remember that? Does that ring a bell? I'm not sure if I have the head for this, the headspace. We'll give it a try. What can I do? Shouldn't be trying to avoid something that's complicated. I'm going to take out a Rambam, La'am. That has makes life a little bit easier. Not always, but sometimes. Perek Ches Halacha Daled. Let's see. Nasa momon chaveru biyodo unisono lianos. So this is a kind of a moser, and the government has sent its emissary, its representative, to confiscate property, collect taxes, and he takes his friend's object and gives it over to the anos. Chayav l'shalem mikol mokom. I think the words mikol mokom mean even though he was pressured to do so, maybe even his life was at stake. But as we said before, also liodem lahatzil asatzim moment shel chaver, and he has to pay for that. Afal pisha melech anoso lahavi. Let's see, he had something in the. Oh, vimlo yovi yimiseu. Wow, his life will be taken if he doesn't pass on his friend's possessions to the anos. Mutalo lahavi. I mean, this is a case of pikuach nefesh. Otherwise, he's going to die. B'chol zot chayav l'shalim. But medvar mamurim. Now the Rambam qualifies it. Shemanoso lahavi vehevi chayav. That even though he was threatened at the point of death to bring what he brought, meaning to present that mammon, and he did so. He had to actively transfer the mammon into the reshus of the anas. And that makes him, he says in the footnote, a mazik biyadayim. And this apparently is the Gemara that we saw quoted here in note number Ches in the Masifta, where he said, also liyadam lahatzilas mamono la'atzilas hasva momon chaver. Aval ana sha'anas Yisrael acher eu. So in other words, he was forced to point to the safe, so to speak, if you follow me. That's where you'll find the mum. That's what he was forced to reveal. But he didn't actually go into his friend's domain and pull out the object that they were forcing him to pull out. But hereu vi omad ha'anas al hamamon v'nasa b'shuso. So once he gave the keys to the anos, he went to the safe and he unlocked the safe. And then he confiscated the possession. The onas es Yisrael acholichu lo l'mokom acher. Or he forced the Jew to take him along to another place, another location. Afilu holicho zeh moser sheher'o. In other words, it's not only that the moser showed him where the gold is, but he even walked him over there. Pasha took him by hand. Hareza potem l'sham. Now we could only guess that the Rambam is saying that in this case he didn't actually pick up his friend's property and hand it over to the Anas. The Anas did all the dirty work himself. Is shekevon she'omad Anas b'tzada otza kvar ovad kol mashi yeshbo ukilu nisraf. Oh boy, the Rambam gives us a complex answer. I thought there could have been a straightforward, simple answer. I think what's going on is the following. The Anas knows where the palace, so to speak, of the Jew is. He can identify that palace. He has the power, the potential to, with a fire, to burn it to the ground. But that's not what he wants to do. He just simply wants to get possession of the guy's bag of diamond rings. Of diamonds. He doesn't know where the diamonds are, where they stashed away. So he forces another Jew, let's say we'll call him Shimon, the owner of the palaces of the diamonds is Reuven, and the Anos got a hold of Shimon and forced him at gunpoint to show, to reveal the safe or the location in which these diamonds are being kept. So the Rambam says that at this point, since the Anos is standing next to the palace of Reuven, he can burn it to the ground. I'm trying to figure out whether we'll get the diamonds. I don't know. But once he has the potential to burn the house down, then Shimon is really saving Reuven's house by revealing the place where those diamonds are being hidden. So that's what the Rambam says. Kevan sha'omad ha'anas b'tzad ha'otzar. He says here in the footnote, on the second line here, number Lamed Aleph, Sheyamama b'shus anas haya u'ki'ilu kvar nisraf v'lo iziko klum v'al masha heralo hu pot. So again, the Rambam adds another dimension here that the anos at this point could just burn down the whole house. So Reuven, the owner of the house, is going to be left with nothing, not the diamonds and not his house. But the ki'ilu kvar nisraf here is what the Rambam is emphasizing. Sounds like the principle of gavra ketila kokotil. So that's what we have so far. Now, there's a hasag of the Ravid that doesn't appear in that volume that I showed you from Rambam La'am. He says, "Nosa moment chaver biyodav v'nosal li'anas chayav l'shalem mikol makom afal pisha melech anosal lahavi Omer Avram gam bo zeh al derech harav hu olech v'ein hagon modelo v'chein bedin she'ein lecha dover ha'omed b'nei pikuach nefesh u'me'ayin yischayev lo zeh." I know the Ravid seems to be saying, like what we said all along, that if mitzad pikuach nefesh is allowed to save himself, then he doesn't have to pay damages if he destroys someone else's property. But that's against the Gemara. Now, I don't know who the Gaon is, maybe Rav Hai Gaon, one of the Gaonim. According to the Ravid's claim, that Gaon would dissent to the Rambam's opinion. He would disagree. Because since Ein L'cha Dover Omed B'fnei Pikuach Nefesh, why should he be chayav to him? He doesn't have to give up his life for the moment of Chavero. Now, I'm just wondering out loud, if maybe the Ravid is operating midin rodef, meaning, remember we said that you can even have a rodef b'shevi altas. So this bag of diamond rings is basically a rodef, right? The Anas is saying, unless I get those rings, those diamonds, I'm going to destroy the whole house, and I'll kill this Jew as well. So in a sense, it's the existence of the diamonds that's threatening the life of the Jew. And therefore the diamonds are rodef achar chavera. Right? Why is the Anas threatening to kill the Jew? Because of these diamonds that he wants to get a hold of. He wants to seize them. Well, that makes the diamonds into a rodif. So the Ravid is saying there's no value to the diamonds. So that even if we call them Shimon would destroy the diamonds of Reuven, he would not be chayav because the diamonds are a rodef. It's because of these diamonds that Shimon's life is in jeopardy. But the only thing is, the Ravid seems to be, in the name of the Gaon, seems to be operating with a different principle, and that's Ein Lecha Davar Omed B'nei Pikuach Nefesh. He doesn't have to die because of the moment of Chavero. So this is really an unclear point here. Why, in the name of the Gaon, are we saying that the Jew is potter from paying damages? Is it based on the fact that he's allowed to save himself and destroy someone else's property because pikuach nefesh? Or is he saying that because the Anas wants these diamonds and otherwise he's going to kill someone if he doesn't get them, those diamonds become a rodif? But be that as it may, the Ravid is against the Gemara. Because the Gemara says, Osul yodam lahatzil asmo b'momen chavera. And we said if the nirdaf destroys someone else's kalim other than the rodif himself, then he's chayav. So pashtus, we could say the following: a man is a fugitive; he's running away from a rodif, trying to save himself, and he destroys someone else's object in order to save himself. That object is not a rodif. No one designated that object. It just happens to be there on the road, and he's got to destroy it to go weiter in the road. So when the Gemara says "Asul li'adam lahatzil asmos b'momen shel chavero," that's the case of a fugitive who's running away, and he has to know darn well that he's going to pay for any damages if he has to damage something in order to save his life. The Ravid, the Ravid in the name of the Gaon is talking about something else entirely. He's talking about a situation in which the Anos designated a specific object, and he said, give me this object or your life. The object now becomes a rodef. And the nirdaf, who's that, Shimon is being forced, etc., he's going to save his life by killing the rodef. And who's the rodef? Now it's that package of diamonds is the rodef. So again, when the Gemara says, and he's going to have to pay for that, that's talking about a fugitive who's running away from the rodef, and he hides behind something where he has to destroy it, whatever it is, in order to save his life. He has to know up front that he's going to pay for that damage. The Ravid is talking about a whole different set of circumstances in which the Anos wants X, and he is pinpointing X. Give me that or you'll die. Such a case, the Ravid says, you're allowed to give over the diamonds, but moreover, you don't have to pay for them. So let me see if anything that I said fits into the language. He says, oh, I wanted to say that makes it a Rodef situation. The Ozai, Sover Arrivid, again in the name of the Gon, the Immosar Liakum, Kedelatsios Nafshe Potivitashlumin. Okay, he doesn't say why. Aval be ofen shalo yichtolo akum mamon. If the guy didn't say, I want this mama misuyam, umasalo, ozayu chayv l'shalem dekol echad yochol liton lama b'chartas mamoni. In other words, the owner of the object that was taken by the nirdaf to save himself has right to say, well, why did you take my object? I guess maybe there were other options. But in case of Yichid Lo, where the Anos wants that and only that, then you give it over and you don't have to pay for that. Okay, so this is where we'll stop for today. And tomorrow is what? Is Monday? Right. What is the date of tomorrow? Anybody know?
March 20th.
What? Tomorrow's the 20th? Okay. And we want to get together when?
It's going to be Wednesday.
That's the 24th?
22nd.
Oh, the 22nd. Tomorrow's the 20th, and then Tuesday is the 21st, and then Wednesday is the 22nd.
I've never entered.
What?
Yes.
And